Hello, Abnormal Investigations family. It's good to see you guys. I guess you all know that we are raising really fast right now. Everything's growing really good, and that's thanks to you guys. If you have not subscribed to this channel, I would like to invite you to so you don't miss anything. We got a lot of cool things coming up. In fact, Sarah informed me tonight that we are going boots on the ground this Wednesday night at 8:45 p.m. Central Daylight Time, so you're not going to want to miss that. I got another guy, he sent in an encounter that happened around here, and Sarah said, we're going. So, we're going to be going down there, weather permitting, as long as it doesn't rain. And, I've got this encounter, guys, I think you're going to really enjoy. It comes out of Maine, and we know Maine is really well known for dogmen, werewolves, so let's go ahead and get into this encounter. Hello, Mike. I have an encounter for you that I think you will really find interesting. My friend and I are in our 40s. We love the outdoors. We was hunting on some land here in Maine, and something terrible happened. We had set up camp and was ready to make dinner when we heard it. At first it sounded like it was going to be a normal coyote howl. But in the howls, there was something different. It didn't sound right. We made our dinner, and then we sit by the fire planning the hunt for the next morning. As we sat there, the howls got closer and closer, and we could feel the hairs on the back of our necks standing up. It wasn't just the sound that was unsettling. It was the feeling that came with it, like something was watching us, waiting maybe to strike, or it was just a feeling like of just being watched. We tried to brush it off as just our imagination, but we couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. And that's when we saw it. A figure emerged from the darkness. Its eyes were reflecting from the light of the fire. We froze. It was unlike anything we'd ever seen before. Tall, imposing, with eyes that seemed to bore into our souls. We were paralyzed with fear, unable to move or speak, and then, just as suddenly as it appeared, it walked off into the darkness. We grabbed our rifles, and Ted fires a warning shot into the air. The sound of the rifle shot echoed through the forest, and for a moment everything seemed to freeze. The figure halted its approach, and we could sense its eyes were on us, that it was now burning. We stood our ground, rifles at the ready, prepared to defend ourselves against this thing. But to our surprise, it didn't charge. Instead, it let out a blood-curdling scream like nothing we'd ever heard before. The creature turned and disappeared into the darkness, leaving us shaken and bewildered. We stood there for a long moment, our hearts racing, trying to process what had just happened. Mike, it gets worse. We decided to share a tent. To be honest, neither of us wanted to be alone. As we settled into the tent, trying to shake off this feeling of unease, we heard strange noises outside. At first, it sounded like a twig snapping and leaves rustling, but then we heard our names being whispered. Ted! John! It was a low, raspy voice that seemed to be all around us. We froze, our hearts pounding in our chests. We knew that we were not alone, and it was scary to not be alone in these woods. But it seemed like something was toying with us. The voice grew louder, more menacing, and we could feel a presence closing in around us. Suddenly, the tent fabric started to ripple and shake, like something was trying to get in. Then we saw this large shadow of a hand scratch across the side of the tent. We grabbed our rifles, ready to defend ourselves, but what happened next was something neither one of us will ever forget anytime soon. Or should I say, I won't forget, but we'll talk about that later. And that is when it ripped open the zipper, and a long, hairy, very muscular arm grabbed Ted's leg and started to pull him from our tent. It was growing, and it was growling like a dog in a dogfight. It was terrible sounding. I was paralyzed with fear, unable to move or speak, as I watched in terror as my best friend Ted was dragged out of his tent. Yes, dragged out from right beside me. His legs were kicking wildly, and he was screaming at the top of his lungs, and one arm was doing all this. One arm was dragging a full-grown man out of his tent by one leg. The arm was pulling him deeper into the darkness, and I knew that I had to act fast. I grabbed my rifle, jumped out with my 30-30 in hand. I racked one into the chamber, and I was ready to face whatever was at the other end of that arm. As I emerged into the darkness, I saw a sight that will haunt me for the rest of my life. A towering creature, its body massive of muscle and hair. It was holding Ted in its grasp. It looked just like a damn werewolf you'd see on TV. Its jaws were open wide, revealing razor-sharp teeth, and the smell on it was nasty, stinking smell. It smelled like a rotted roadkill, like a dead possum or something that was dead on the side of the road. The damn thing smelled like it should have had maggots on it. It was terrible. I raised my rifle ready to fire, but my hands were shaking so hard I could hardly aim. I had a scope on my rifle, and as you know, in the dark, a scope is almost useless too, so I was shaking and trying to look through a scope in low light. The creature's eyes locked onto mine. I knew in that moment that we were effed. I fired a shot at the demon from hell. It dropped Ted and ran into the darkness, and that's whenever I grabbed him, and we started trying to make our way back to the truck. I knew, yes, that we needed to get Ted to the ER. His leg was bleeding profusely. We threw our gear in the back of the truck that we had on us, and from that cursed place we drove as fast as we could. Ted was pale and shaken, his leg bleeding profusely from the creature's grip. I pushed the truck to its limits, racing down the dirt road, praying we'd make it to the hospital in time. As we sped away, I caught a glimpse of something in the rearview mirror. The creature was standing in the road, watching us drive away. We finally reached the hospital, and Ted was rushed into surgery. The doctor said he'd be okay. We faced something terribly evil that night. Something that didn't want us in those woods. And as I sit here writing this letter to you, Mike, I know that I'll never set foot in those woods again. The memory of that creature's eyes will haunt me forever. A reminder of the terror we faced in the dark, dark, forsaken, evil woods. I went home to get some rest, planning to see Ted the next day. I noticed there was marks on the tailgate of my truck where he had grabbed it. I'd never heard it or seen it, but it had to have grabbed it to have damaged it. I saw the deep gashes in the metal, a reminder of the creature's incredible strength. I knew then that maybe it had followed us, that it had been watching us even as we escaped. I felt a sense of unease, knowing that I had brought this terror back to my own doorstep, possibly. I tried to shake off the feeling, telling myself that it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. But as I walked toward my house, I noticed something else. The windows were all open and the curtains were blowing in the wind. I knew I had closed them before I left for the hospital. A sense of dread crept over me as I realized that the creature might have been in my house watching me, waiting for me. I cautiously approached the door, my heart racing with anticipation. I slowly turned the handle and pushed it open, calling out into the darkness. "Hello? Is anyone there?" I checked every room in my house, and it was all clear. That night I heard something outside. I woke the next day and noticed my barn door was open. I ignored it like I didn't notice it. When I went to get into the truck, I heard a name. I heard my name being called by what sounded like a young boy's voice. It yelled, "Help me, I fell in the barn." I ignored it and I left like I never heard it. I drove away from the house, trying to shake off the feeling of unease, but the voice kept echoing in my mind. "Help me, I fell in the barn." It was a voice that sent chills all over me, a voice that seemed to come from somewhere deep. I knew then that the creature was playing a sinister game with me, trying to lure me into its clutches. I didn't dare look back, fearing what I might see. I kept driving like I didn't hear it. I didn't want it to know that I did. My heart pounding in my chest until I reached the hospital where Ted was recovering. As I sat by his bedside trying to make out this sense of events, In the past 24 hours, I knew that I had to tell him everything. I had to warn him about the creature's ability to manipulate and to deceive, and to sound like other people. But as I began to speak, I realized that Ted's eyes had changed. They had sunken into his face. They said that Ted was in a deep shock and would need to stay a while. I went back to my house with 3 more friends. We checked the barn, and nothing was there, but it smelled like a very strong piss odor. The smell was overwhelming, like nothing I'd ever experienced before. It was as if something had marked its territory, warning us to stay away. I'm talking very strong urine. My friends and I searched every inch of the barn, but we couldn't find anything out of the ordinary. As we left the barn, I noticed something strange. The windows of my house were all open again, and the curtains were blowing in the wind. Now I knew that this time I had closed the windows for sure before I'd left for the hospital. My friend and I exchanged a nervous glance. We knew that something was off, something that didn't want us there. We decided to stay together to watch each other's back as we tried to figure out what in the hell was going on. But as we approached the house, I heard it again. The voice, it was whispering my name, calling me back to the barn. "Come and see," it said. "Come and see what I've left for you." We all heard it. We turned and we ran back toward the barn. When we went there, it had Ted's necklace hung over a nail over the door as we went into the barn. Afraid for Ted and knowing that he never took that necklace off, we ran to the truck and we rushed to the hospital. The nurse told us that we was just in time. Ted had passed away from a heart attack about 10 minutes earlier. I'm writing this to you, Mike, as a warning. I don't know what that creature was or what its motivations were, but I know that it's real and it's still out there. I've moved away, started a new life, but I can't shake the feeling that it's still watching me, waiting for this moment to strike. I've told you my story, Mike, in the hopes that you'll believe me, that you'll understand that some things are just better left alone and unseen. I know that I'll never forget that encounter because I lost my best friend. That creature's eyes, its voice, the memory that will haunt me until my dying day. Thank you for listening, Mike. Thank you for believing me. Don't go into the woods, Mike. Don't go looking for answers. Some things are just better left unknown, and sometimes even better left unspoken. Godspeed. I'm sorry about your friend. That's very, very sad. Firing a warning shot, I have done that in the past. It has its pluses and it has, the negatives. The plus to firing a warning shot is it will cause sometimes things to flee, to run away, to scare things away. Also, sometimes a warning shot can do the opposite. It can cause something to attack, and it can also cause you to have night blindness by the flash, and also it can cause your hearing to be, not as good for a while until the initial shock wears off from the gunfire. So you really need to think it out before you go, firing around, and also you need to know where that round's going to go, where it's going to land, As far as it attacking you all like that, unprovoked, it sounds like it was pretty evil. I think that these things sometimes get kicked out of clans, and I think they start their own clans with the other ones that have been kicked out. And then you can have a rogue clan, which is very, very dangerous. It sounds to me like you ran across an evil one. I mean, it came into your camp, it left, and then it came back that night, and without hesitation, it just, boom, attacked your friend. So, I think this was one of the most evilest ones that you could have ran into because of what it done, and then your friend, ultimately losing his life. I don't think there's anything you could have done different. Trying to aim a scope in the dark, I understand that's hard to do. Been a hunter. I know that whenever you try to use even a scope in low light, it sometimes can be difficult, if not impossible. So yeah, you all was at a disadvantage. You didn't have, the right kind of weapon for the environment you was in. It probably would have been better if you would have had a good sidearm. But other than that, I've been thinking about, even when I go camping now, they're making motion detectors now that are solar, or you can even charge them in your car. And I'm even thinking, would it be a good idea to put motion detectors around your campsite, around your tent and stuff, so that if something does walk up there, then you got these these bright lights that's going to come on and illuminate the area, which, from my understanding, most of the time, whenever light is shining on these creatures, they retreat. So that might be something you might want to think about in the future. I'm getting ready to do another Patreon YouTube member drop with some more photos. Mike has went through our last Boots on the Ground video, and he did find some things. The gray creature that we seen in the video, man, he got some really good still photos of it. We're going to be putting those out, so you're not going to want to miss those. And I'll be dropping those on the Patreon and YouTube. YouTube members will get those. I want to thank everybody for your support, your continual support, for believing in us. It means a lot to us, and if you've seen the film that was just released, and you can kind of see what I've been going through, how they create this narrative of lies, and they deceive and conspire against people, and I know what it feels like, and I'm sorry for anybody that's went through it from these people. So until next time, guys, keep your head on a swivel, don't be something's dinner, and we'll see you on the next one. God bless.